Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so final birth pangs of Messiah, hopefully. Um that's what this video is about. Um so it's a crazy time in the world. Okay, the news is so depressing these days. I'm really hoping we're in the final stretch of the birth pangs. I was actually really holding out hope for Christmas Day, which was also the seventh day of Hanukkah, um, as you know, when we were going to see the Messiah come back, because there were so many connections. But it didn't happen. And then now we have the rabbis too are lamenting about Hanukkah coming and going and no Messiah. They're wondering why we didn't merit the Messiah coming during this Hanukkah. But there has been so much prophecy being fulfilled, and I'm not sure I can cover it all, but I'll try to cover some of the big stuff. Starting out with like the crazy time in the world, and the birth pangs. As of January 1st, there was a bunch of new laws being enacted in our country that has made life harder for God's people. It really reminds me of the verses in Exodus 1. So, verse 11. So the Egyptians appointed over the Israelites tax collectors to afflict them with their burdens. And they built store cities for Pharaoh, namely Pithom and Ramesses. So the Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel with back-breaking labor. And they embittered their lives with hard labor, with clay and with bricks, and with all kinds of labor in the fields. All their work that they worked with them with back-breaking labor. Okay, so this translation is actually from Chabad.org. So I like how the Jewish people translate it. They translate the taskmasters to be tax collectors, okay? And we really see that with Biden, that he's been using so much of America's money for his left socialist ideas, his world agenda that he has. And it's really making life harder for us because the economy is kind of in a wreck right now. And, so life is just really hard for the average person, okay? And then, like one thing that I think of is eggs. Like, I was at two stores yesterday, two grocery stores, no eggs. And so that's kind of depressing. So it's, or actually kind of scary because if you depend on, things like eggs, to eat, what are we going to eat if we can't get eggs? And eggs have actually been kind of a cheap thing for the average, person to buy, as a healthy food that's inexpensive. But now they want to enact these laws where, and I don't know when this is supposed to start, if it started January 1st but they want all the chickens to be cage free or something along those lines, which is really going to raise up the prices of the eggs. I mean, the bird flu has already, made a mess of the chickens too. Anyways, so that's one example of things just really being harder. And then I live in Colorado, and they have started, you have to pay 10 cents for bags now starting January 1st. You either have to bring your own bags or pay 10 cents. And so my husband and I were going to do this quick trip to the store, and it's like, we got to bring a bag. There's no such thing as a quick trip. You got to plan ahead and you got to bring your bags. And actually, I was driving through the parking lot of Walmart yesterday and saw this guy dropping things out of his cart because he didn't have his stuff in bags when he was leaving the store after he checked out. So it's just crazy. So that's going on. So really, I really do think that, our slavery has gotten harder, and especially in January 1st. And there's stuff too with the health insurance and things like that that have really made life harder for the average person. Um, and so, backing up a little bit, so Hanukkah was December 19th through the 26th. Okay, so Hanukkah commemorates the oil that lasted for 8 days. Okay, now what I figured out about Hanukkah, which is really interesting, is that the Hanukkah story and celebration is just juxtaposed to the curse of Haggai. Okay, so what's interesting is that Haggai actually mentions uh, the Hanukkah Eve, um, the date of Hanukkah Eve. Um, in Haggai 2:10, it says, "On the 24th of the ninth month, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to Haggai the prophet." Okay, so the 24th of the ninth month on the Hebrew calendar is Hanukkah Eve. Okay, and so it goes on to say, "But now do consider from this day onward, before one stone was placed on another in the temple of the Lord, from that time when one came to a grain heap of 20 measures, there would only be 10. When one came to the wine vat to draw 50 measures, there would be only 20. I smote you in every work of your hands with blasting wind, mildew, and hail, yet you did not come back to me, declares the Lord. Do consider from this day onward, from the 24th day of the ninth month, from the day when the temple of the Lord was founded, consider, is the seed still in the barn? Even including the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree, it has not borne fruit. Yet from this day on, I will bless you, or I will bless." Um, so I was thinking about that during Hanukkah while we were lighting the lights, and thinking about, because the story of Hanukkah is um, that the Jewish people, um, so basically the story of Hanukkah comes from a time that occurred a little bit before Jesus's day, when um, I think it was, let me think, was it the Romans or the Greeks? They, oh, it would be the Greeks, I think. They took over the temple, and their leader, Antiochus, um, went in and sacrificed a pig on the altar. And so that was the abomination of desolation in that day. And so what happened is that the Jews rose up militarily and fought against the Greeks and got the temple back. And so when they were purifying and cleansing the temple, they wanted to light the menorah, but the story goes, and I haven't seen this in any of this, it's not in scripture. And so this is a tradition, okay? And so when they went to light the menorah, there was only one cruse of oil. But the story goes that the oil lasted for 8 days instead of the one day that they only had oil for. Okay. So it's interesting when you compare that. So oil that should only last one day lasted 8 days. Okay. So then if you compare that to the curse, okay, so our grain, instead of lasting 20 days, only lasts 10 days. I mean, that's not exactly what it says, but kind of that concept. Okay. And so we're not being blessed by God, we're being cursed. Okay. We're under a curse. Okay. And, so, I mean, excuse me. So partly, obviously, living under the leadership in America right now, living under the Biden government, that is causing some of our slavery, but also the curse of God. But also having a wicked government is, the curse of God. And God says, why does he do this? Because, the reason why he smotes us in every work of our hands is he wants us to come back to him. Okay. And really he wants us to cry out to him and pray for salvation and pray for deliverance. Um, so that's what's going on. The one thing I wanted to point out about Hanukkah is I really think this story, it's interesting that the Jewish people kind of celebrate this story of the oil, because I really think it's a picture of the Messiah and how, okay, so we read in Daniel about there being 8 kings, okay? And so I think the true um, miracle is going to be that after we've had these 8 kings in America that have um, basically, that we've lost Christianity in America, is that the bright light of Messiah is going to survive the 8 kings, okay? And so I think that's the true miracle of Hanukkah, okay? Um, so exciting, huh? Okay, so one of the things I was wondering is that if God said he's going to start blessing on Hanukkah, who is being blessed? And so God says in Haggai 2:19, it says, "Is the seed still in the barn, even including the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree? It has not borne fruit. Yet from this day on I will bless." Okay, then the word of the Lord came a second time to Haggai on the 24th of the month, saying, "Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I'm going to shake the heavens and the earth. I will overthrow the thrones of kingdoms and destroy the power of the kingdoms of the nations, and I will overthrow the chariots and their riders, and the horses and their riders will go down, everyone by the sword of another. On that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, my servant, declares the Lord, and I will make you like a signet, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts." Okay, so I really believe Zerubbabel, okay, who's going to be like a signet. So Zerubbabel, what I believe it's saying is that Zerubbabel is going to be a sign, okay? And so, and he, in these verses, is called the governor of Judah, okay? So one thing to keep in mind is that Netanyahu was sworn in as the prime minister on December 29th, 2022, which was 3 days after Hanukkah, okay? So we're seeing kind of that blessing being poured out on Netanyahu, okay? And just because someone's being blessed doesn't mean that they are righteous, okay? Remember that God will bless the wicked for his purposes, okay? And so I really think that there's a reason why God has Netanyahu back in power, okay? And I really believe it has a lot to do with that God is going to use Netanyahu to bring his judgment to Israel, okay? Just like I think God is going to use Trump to bring God's judgment to America, okay? And so, so God says he's going to shake the heavens and the earth. So I think the heavens is a prophetic picture of Israel, and then the earth is a prophetic picture of America. And then so God says, I'm going to overthrow the thrones of kingdoms and destroy the power of the kingdoms of the nations. Okay. And so we see that happening because, first we saw Netanyahu, really kind of miraculously come back into power in Israel. He was able to form a government, after like, I don't know how many times trying to form a government and it not working. Okay. So that's been going on. And then now we're seeing with Biden, like he was kind of on the top of his game, things were going well. And then now this document situation has come in, and um, it's like he's falling in power. Okay. And the other thing that we see too is, so we're kind of seeing this slow move, like the left sort of slowly losing the power and the Republicans sort of gaining in power. Okay, because we've seen now the Republicans have power in the House. Okay. And so I really believe that that's what God is causing to happen right now. Okay. And I highlighted here in these verses because God said, um, the horses and the riders will go down, everyone by the sword of another. Okay. And so I think that's a picture of the civil war that's coming to America, and that's how God is going to bring down the horses and the riders. How God's going to bring down the wicked is by the sword of another. Okay, so basically, the wicked goes into civil war with the wicked. Okay, and that's how God's going to bring judgment. Okay, um, and and so then God says about Zerubbabel, I will make you a signet, for I have chosen you. So we read in Jeremiah 22 where it says, Thus says the Lord, go down to the house of the king of Judah, and there speak this word, and say, Hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, who sits on David's throne, you and your servants and your people who enter these gates. Thus says the Lord, do justice and righteousness, and deliver the one who has been robbed from the power of his oppressor. Also, do not mistreat or do violence to the stranger, the orphan, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place. Okay, does it continue? Yeah, it continues on the next page. But if you will not obey these words, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that this house will become a desolation. For I will set apart destroyers against you, each with his weapons, and they will cut down your choicest cedars and throw them on the fire. But your eyes and your heart are intent only upon your own dishonest gain, and on shedding innocent blood, and on practicing oppression and extortion. As I live, declares the Lord, even though Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were a signet on my right hand, yet I would pull you off. And I will give you over into the hand of those who are seeking your life. Yes, into the hand of those whom you dread, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. Okay, so obviously these are prophetical verses, and just like I'm always saying that prophecy is a little hidden, difficult to kind of unpack, because I think God has a lot of stories about future events all kind of smushed into few verses. Okay, because I think we're reading about both what's going to happen in America and what's going to happen to Israel are kind of stacked into these verses. Okay, but it was interesting that God said, okay, so he's saying, Hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, who sits on David's throne, you and your servants and your people who enter these gates. Okay, so what's interesting about that is that we had Ithamar ben Gavir walked on the Temple Mount on January 3rd, okay, of this year. Okay, now the reason why that is bad is that it stirs up Israel's enemies, and so then the common people who have already been suffering just nonstop terrorist attacks, like I think pretty much all throughout 2022. And the reason why you don't hear about it is they're smaller terrorist attacks. It's Palestinians with knives, and Palestinians with stones, and Palestinians going after people driving cars, and Palestinians going after the soldiers at the gates. But it causes the people in Israel to just be uncomfortable about their everyday life. Okay, and so you don't need to be stirring up Israel's enemies, but that's what, because of Ben Gavir's agenda about the Temple Mount, because I think he wants to restore the he wants to change the status quo of the Temple Mount, because he believes Jewish people should be able to walk on the Temple Mount. And yes, it would be nice, but you have to live under the reality that God sets up for you. Okay. And so because he cares more about his agenda than the common everyday person in Israel, God's not happy with him or with, Netanyahu. Okay. Because what does God say? He wants us to be doing justice and righteousness and delivering the one who has been robbed from the power of his oppressor. Okay, he wants us to not mistreat or do violence to the stranger, the orphan, or the widow, and to not shed innocent blood in this place. Because if Ben Gvir cares more about his agenda, um, innocent people, innocent lives in Israel could get killed. Okay. But we see the same thing happening in America too, that we have Biden who cares more about his agenda than, and the left in general care more about their agenda of, the climate change and saving the planet and stupid stuff like that, that's oppressing God's people. Okay. And then, and the same thing with Trump too, that there's things that Trump cares more about than, um, God's people, than the stranger, the orphan, or the widow. Okay. Um, and so God says, if you will not obey these words, caring for the widow and the orphan, he said, this house will become a desolation, and I will set apart destroyers against you, each with his weapons. Okay, and they will cut down your choicest cedars and throw them on the fire. Okay, so definitely a picture of the fiery furnace, relating back to what I said previously, where, we see like civil war coming, um, and, so God says about, um, the wicked people, your eyes and your heart are intent only upon your own dishonest gain and on shedding innocent blood and on practicing oppression and extortion. Um, so, that's kind of a good description of our leaders, and really probably the leaders around the world. Okay. Um, and then, so God says, even though Kenaiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were a signet on my right hand, yet I would pull you off. So even though God has raised up Netanyahu to be a sign, he's unless Netanyahu repents, God's gonna pull him, he's gonna pull him off his right hand. Okay. So it's interesting too that it talks about the right hand, because Netanyahu is really on the far right politically, on the political scale. Okay. Very far right. And that's kind of the complaint about this government, is that it's, kind of, very far right. Okay. And then God says, I will give you over into the hand of those who are seeking your life, into the hand of those whom you dread, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. So these are verses where you could see like there's, it's kind of stacked. He's, talking about like two groups of people, maybe, like, I mean, they actually probably connected, but I think prophetically the hand of Nebuchadnezzar and then the hand of the Chaldeans could be two different, um, groups, prophetically speaking. Okay. And so, it's interesting that it says, I will give you over into the hand of those who are seeking your life. So we see in Israel that, Iran, right now wants to kill America, kill Israel. And so is God going to give Israel over into the hand of Iran, or is he going to give Israel over into the hand of the Palestinians? And then, and he could possibly just be talking about Netanyahu as the, just Netanyahu, but I think, this is really relating to the judgment of Israel. And then, and then it says, I will hand you over into the hand of those whom you dread. Okay, so that could connect to Trump and his followers in America, that he's going to hand them over. He's going to give Biden's people over to Trump's followers, to bring judgment. Okay. Because right now Biden and his followers dread, they have dread about Trump and his followers. Okay. So hopefully you can follow that. So a lot kind of smushed in there. Okay. Um, and so I believe we're at the time of the fullness of sins, okay? And, just the biblical teaching on that. God said to Abraham, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I will also judge the nation whom they serve, and afterwards they will come out with many possessions. Then in the fourth generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. So God wouldn't let the Israelites, they couldn't um, they couldn't gain the land until God allowed the Amorites to complete the fullness of their iniquity, before God gave the land to the Israelites. Okay, and so that's kind of a biblical principle that God follows. Okay, and so I believe that that's happening in our day. That God is not going to allow His people to um, possess the land until Biden and his followers, until their sin is complete, which I think we've hit the complete mark for them. But then also too, we need to hit the fullness of the sins for Trump and his followers. Okay, and I think that's coming up really soon. Okay, I mean, I think that's going to happen in the Civil War, because I think they're going to bring destruction to America, and then their sin will be complete. Okay, and then in Romans 11 we read, for I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And I also put in here Romans 11:8. It says, just as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes to see not, and ears to hear not, down to this very day. So the beginning of that chapter talks about, that deluding influence that I talked about in my other videos, the deluding influence that came on the Trump followers, connected to, it seemed like it all happened around the election, that Trump lost. And, but it's definitely bigger than that. I mean, you definitely see God's hand in causing these people, to not be able to see the truth, that's right in front of them. And and so this partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Basically, you have the wheat and the tares, and God has allowed the tares to be hardened, in in order to bring in the fullness of their sin. Okay, in order until the fullness of the Gentiles, the tares has come in. Okay, but also God might be using the Trump people to bring out the fullness of Biden and his followers' sins too. And I talked in my last video about the resurrection of the wicked, and so the fact that we've seen Netanyahu return to power is a fulfillment of the resurrection of the wicked, kind of coming back to life. And, so the next step is that we're going to see, and we're, seeing a few steps of that with Trump's and his followers, kind of the resurrection of them, the wicked, the tares of the Trump followers. We're going to see their resurrection. Basically God's going to raise them up to bring destruction and judgment. Okay. So fullness of sins connected to the end of the 2 full years. Okay, is what I'm wondering about. Okay. So it says in Genesis 41, it said, now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. And lo, from the Nile there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grass. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and gaunt, and they stood by the cows on the bank of the Nile. The ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. The thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Um, so in the first dream, we have the thin cows eating the fat cows. And then in the second dream, we have the thin corn eats the fat corn. Okay. And that happens at the end of 2 full years. Okay. So I'm wondering if that is showing us that Biden only gets 2 years of his presidency, is what I'm thinking. And they were pretty full years. Okay. Um, and it's funny because when I read it this time, because before, okay, so when I looked at it before, I had, okay, the thin cows eating the fat cows was a picture of, Trump's right wing government overtakes Obama's left wing government, when Trump became president. Then Pharaoh awoke, okay, and so that's a picture of Biden's head wound being healed. Okay, so the head wound being healed is a picture of the authority being returned. Okay, so not Trump, but Biden and Obama had a problem in that they lost their leadership positions. Okay, so they had head wounds. Okay, they were no longer the head. They were no longer in charge. Okay, but Biden's head wound got healed when, after Trump's presidency, Biden won the election. Okay, and then it says he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And then it's 7 ears of grain, so that could be Biden falling asleep. And then, okay, first it says he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. So I wrote, that's Biden's dream coming true, the fullness of his plans, his sins, okay, because the corn becomes fat, okay, or the grain. And then, but then, behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears, okay. So Trump's peeps come and swallow Biden's fat corn, okay. Then Pharaoh awoke, and so I said that could be a picture of Trump returning, or it could be a picture of the Messiah's return. And behold, it was a dream, and it could just be, well, and so the fact that it says behold a dream, could be a picture of the Messianic kingdom that God says it's gonna seem like we're dreaming when the Messianic kingdom comes. Okay. So I think these verses could maybe have, two different fulfillments. One, the thin cows eating the fat cows could be Trump's followers, knocking down Biden's followers, okay, in the Civil War and at the last days, okay. And then it says Pharaoh awoke. That could be the Messiah waking up, okay. And then the second time with the thin corn eating the fat corn could be a picture of Messiah and his army knocking down Trump's fat corn. Okay. So 2 possible fulfillments. I mean, really, that's kind of the way prophecy goes. It's so full and rich that it could tell several stories in the same story. I mean, it's just incredible. And so what I thought was kind of interesting is that it'd be helpful to understand. So look at the 4 lines that I have in the middle here. We kind of see a repeat of, okay, first we have Obama, Biden had 8 years, then they suffered a head wound, to their authority. Okay, and then Trump became president for 4 years, then he suffered a head wound. And then Biden gets healed of his head wound and he's president for 2 years. I'm thinking, that we could find in prophecy, we find a lot about the concept of 2 full years. Okay, so I think Biden may only be president for 2 years and then he suffers a head wound. And I think we're already kind of seeing that. We're seeing the downfall of Biden with the document situation. Okay. And then what we have is then uh, Trump returning, so that he could have his fullness of his sins, and then he suffers a final blow to his authority by Messiah. Okay, so see how that works. Um, and I think that picture is kind of repeated, like we see that same kind of picture in the 9/11 picture, um, and because I mean, we do, because we see the one tower gets hit by the plane, then the other tower gets hit by the plane, and then the one tower falls, and then the other tower falls. Okay. Um, so we see that picture there in the towers. So I was going to say something else. So if you understand that that's what's going on, um, so um, yeah, I think I was going to say something about, Biden kind of falling. Huh. There was a verse or something I think that might have connected to that, but I don't remember now. Okay, so we'll move on here. And then in Matthew 24:30, we read about the sign of the Son of Man. Okay, it says, verse 30, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Okay, so I think we like. Okay, so this sign of the Son of Man, I think, is just repeated all throughout Scripture. We see it in nature. And, it's that whole concept of like Jesus on the cross with the two thieves, or like the manger scene, it's Jesus with Joseph and Mary. Okay. Um, so Jesus with someone on his right and someone on his left. Okay. Um, and so what it was interesting, if you looked at the Hanukkah picture that happened December 2022, we had the 7 lights of Hanukkah were lit. Okay, which is very interesting because that connects to the temple menorah. Okay, but we see that number 7, which I think connects to Biden because I believe he's the 7th king. Okay. um um and that is interesting when you think about, that in January we saw that he was trying to hide, Biden was trying to hide the truth about the his documents being found. And um, now, like, we've gotten more disclosure about that situation. Okay, so as much as Biden's trying to hide the truth about himself, God is bringing. I think that might have been what I was going to say, is that God is bringing. In the last days, he's going to reveal things. Okay, and so he's revealing truths about Biden. Okay, he's not allowing some of those truths to be hidden. Okay, um, and so we got the 7 lights on the one side at the front of Christmas, and then we had Christmas Day, which would connect to Jesus. So I think the 7 lights might connect to Biden. Okay, and then we had Christmas Day, and then we had the 8th day of Hanukkah, which it was interesting, that was December 26th. So you could take 26 and the 2 and the 6 add up to 8. Or you could say it's the second time of the number 6. Okay, so like the second time. Okay, so Trump is the 6th king, and the 8th day is going to be his second time. Okay, in power. Okay. So that's what I was wondering, is what happened at Christmas, what God was trying to show us at Christmas. So, so like I said, we're really looking at Christmas Day because it was the 7th day of Hanukkah and no Messiah. But we did see this sign, a very strong sign at Hanukkah. Okay. Um, and then some more pictures of the sign. The burning bush is a picture of, um, that same sign where the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So I think that's like a same picture as like the fiery furnace, where God's people are protected in the fire. Okay. Um, with and in the fiery furnace, we see three people are in the fire, and then this fourth one appears that's like a son of the gods. And so that's a picture of Jesus and his followers. um they're in the fiery furnace, but then they come out and they don't even smell like fire. Okay. But we also see in the story of Samson with the two pillars, is kind of similar to that picture. Jesus on the cross, like I said, there was Matthew 27:38. Then there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and the another on the left. And so I really, really believe. Okay, so the two thieves connects to this picture because we have Biden on with the connected to the seven lights, and Trump connected to day 8. Okay. I mean, we haven't seen the fulfillment of Trump with day 8, but we're getting there. Okay. And so what we're seeing is that God is revealing that there's two thieves right now. Okay. In kind of in the leadership of America. And one on the right side politically and the other on the left politically. Okay. So anyways, and then so I brought up this picture of the supermoons because it's the same thing. It's a picture of the Messiah. And so we have the three moons. One of them's the wolf moon, one of them's the snow moon, and one of them's the worm moon. Okay. And so it's interesting that this happened in 2019. Okay. Because I'm wondering about this 19, because tomorrow is January 19th, and it connects to the Armenian Christmas in Jerusalem. Okay. I don't totally understand, like, they also say the Armenian Christmas is January 6th. Okay, so this is what's kind of confusing to me because I don't understand the Julian calendar and the old calendar and new calendar and how it all works out. I just know that in Jerusalem on the 18th, there's a small little Armenian church in Jerusalem that does a Christmas parade on the 18th, and then their Christmas is on the 19th. And so it's you can celebrate 3 Christmases in Jerusalem, because you get on December 25th is the first one, which is just the general Christian Christmas, and then January 7th is the Orthodox Christmas, and then the last Christmas in Israel is the Armenian Christmas on the 19th. Okay, 18th, 19th. Okay. So, wondering if there's a connection with that. The snow moon connects to, Jesus is going to make our sins white as snow. It was the biggest super moon. Okay. With the wolf moon, I wonder if that connects to Trump, because it says a wolf of the desert. In Jeremiah 5:6, we read about a wolf of the desert will destroy them. And then in John 10, it talks about the shepherd that sees the wolf, like the false shepherd that sees the wolf coming and then he flees. So that could be a picture of the wolf moon. And also I thought it was interesting that wolves howl at the moon. Okay. So I think the sun is like a picture of Israel and the moon is like a picture of America. And so that could be a picture of like Trump's followers. Um, they don't love America like God's people, okay? You know, they howl at America, okay? Um, and so I'm wondering if that's a connection. Um, and then what was interesting too about this wolf moon is that it was the second year and the first day of Trump, okay? And because what's interesting is that Saturday, let me think how this works. Okay, so the 20th, well, okay, depends how you calculate it, but the 20th is the 2 year anniversary of Biden's inauguration. As the crow flies, I mean, actually, the 2 year mark would be tomorrow on the 19th, and then the 2 year first day would be the 20th, or you could also say the 21st is this second year first day. Um, Depending on if you're looking at as the crow flies or, calculating the days. But anyway, so I'm wondering if that's a real significant picture of, we're going to see the Messiah around the 2 year 1 day mark of Biden. Okay. And then we have the worm moon on the left. Well, so it'd be on the left if you're, like if you were the snow moon facing forward, okay? The worm moon would be on your left, okay? So that, I think that connects to Biden, because in Jonah, we read about, but God appointed a worm when dawn came the next day, and it attacked the plant, and it withered. So I think that was a short little story of how, this plant grew up and it was great and it gave shade to Jonah and delivered him from his troubles, which would be a picture of Trump's followers. But then God appointed a worm that attacked the plant and the plant withered. And so Biden came and we were no longer in the shade and the sun was bearing down on us. And so that's definitely a picture of Biden. Okay. So, and then there was a connection to the number 13 too with the worm moon. Because it was 13 months after Billy Graham died. And then I think Barron Trump's birthday was around there. And so 13 I definitely connect to Obama. But kind of an indirect connection to Biden. So that's what I'm wondering about the super moons. Yeah, so I stuck in here right, Trump, left, Biden. And then emphasized, so it was February 19th for the snow moon, and in the year 2019, so emphasized the 2 19s. And then, then we see with the 21, that there's an emphasis with that, so Saturday is the 21st. Okay, and we read in scripture about, who's the guy's name? There's a guy who dies at 777 years old. Okay. So 21 connects to 777, which could also be a picture of like the fullness of sins. Like we read about 666, and I believe since Trump is the sixth king, the 666 connects to him, and that's kind of a picture of the fullness of his sins or his number or whatever. And then so Biden could, being the seventh king, his fullness would look like 777, okay, or 21. So that's what's going on with that. Okay. So what I'm wondering about is 9/11, 11/9. So what was interesting, okay, so the other thing is the last time I made my video, I was really expecting something to happen on 11/9. Okay, and something did, and but it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting the Messiah to come back, but really what happened on 11/9 was the Democrats did well in the elections. Okay. But then it was so interesting because behind the scenes, and we didn't even know this until like last week, meanwhile, the FBI on 11/9 was looking into possible mishandling of classified information with the Biden document situation. So it was so interesting because basically on 11/9, which was like the day after the election, because right, the election was, yeah, on the 8th, God was starting to raise up the Democrats, like even more so than they already were. Um, they did well in the elections and things were going really good for Biden. But it's just so wild because at the same time, God was already planning and setting into motion Biden's downfall. Okay, so very interesting. Okay. Um, oh, Lamech. So it says, so we're actually 21 years after 9/11, 2001, and we see that 21 number connected to 9/11 in the year 2001. Um, it was interesting because with the election, it was 21 months, 21 days from Biden's inauguration to 11/9/2022. So it definitely was a significant day prophetically. Okay, but it wasn't when we saw the Messiah, but we saw Biden, um, just kind of growing in power even more so. Okay, and so kind of what we're seeing is, so that picture of Jacob's ladder, the angels ascending and descending. Okay, so really what I think is Jacob's ladder is a picture of the Messiah, and then the angels ascending and descending are a picture of leaders in our day. Um, well, and this might have been all throughout history that try to ascend the ladder of Messiah. They try to build themselves up as a messianic type figure. Okay, so we definitely saw like Trump doing that. And God allowed that. Trump to do that for a time. He um, God allowed Trump to have power and allowed him to do all these signs. He made all these quote unquote peace deals, for Israel, but then, so we kind of ascended as a messianic type figure, but then God allowed him to descend. Okay. And then same thing with Biden, we saw him kind of ascending and people were really looking at him like, he's some great leader. But now we're kind of seeing him descend. Okay. And so we read about this in Psalm 92, 6-7. It says, a senseless man has no knowledge, nor does a stupid man understand that when the wicked sprouted up like grass, and all who did iniquity flourish, it was only that they might be destroyed forevermore. Okay, so God is going to allow the wicked to sprout up like grass. He's going to allow them to flourish, right before he brings judgment on them. Okay, so that's what we're seeing with Biden, and then we're going to see that with Trump too. Okay, the Trump's going to flourish, and then like I said, we're going to see that we're seeing Netanyahu flourishing, but that's only so God would bring judgment on Netanyahu. So Biden finished the year 2022 positively with his followers. But then, dun dun dun, came the week of January 9, 2023, public revealing of the document situation. So very, very interesting. Okay, so quick review of Lapid's and Biden's abominations. So Lapid was the prime minister right before Netanyahu. We had Bennett, then came Lapid. I mean, was it first Netanyahu, then Bennett, then Lapid? And then back to Netanyahu. Okay. And so Lapid, there was, in my mind, Lapid had fast judgment. Okay. So what we saw was on July 14th, which is interesting because it's 777. Biden and Lapid signed a paper that mentioned the two-state solution. So it was the Jerusalem Declaration, which was a security, quote unquote, agreement. Okay. Peace and safety type thing. Okay. We also saw Lapid mentioning two-state solution on September 22nd, 2022. And then, let's see. On October 27th, we saw interim Prime Minister Lapid signed the U.S. brokered maritime agreement with Lebanon. Okay, so, so I'll finish with Lapid. Is that, what was that on the next page? Oh, yeah, because then I talk about the judgments. Okay. The other thing, too, that I didn't put on this chart about Lapid is that, so apparently this left-wing government that Lapid was a part of, they actually brought the gay agenda into Israel's schools. Okay. So that could be why judgment was really fast on Lapid. Okay. I mean, besides that God's just trying to wrap up things. We're in the birth pangs, the final stages of the birth pangs. But then, and so Biden was a part of this maritime agreement too, because it was the U.S. brokered maritime agreement. Okay, it was trading Israel's sea land for pennies on the dollar. It was a terrible, terrible agreement. Okay. And and same thing again, it's land for peace. This time it was sea land for peace. Okay, because they thought they would have peace with Lebanon if they gave them some of their sea land. Okay, but that never works. Okay, it didn't work with the Palestinians. And then on December 13th, we saw Biden signed, they call it the quote unquote, I have to put it in quotes because, goodness gracious. They call it the Respect for Marriage Act. It's a gay marriage thing. Basically kind of like entrenching it in our government, in our laws. What's interesting is that connects to Esther 3:13. Okay. So it's kind of like you'll have to read Esther 3:13, but it it's kind of talking about Esther 3:13 is talking about kind of Haman's he signed something that brought death to the Jewish people. Okay. Is that how it works? Yeah. And so this quote unquote Respect for Marriage Act is really going to bring death to God's people, that we won't be allowed to not bake cakes for gay people and stuff like that. I didn't read it, but I believe that it's going to be oppressive for God's people. Okay. Just another way to shut us up. Okay. And oppress us. Okay. And then on January 3rd, too, this was really sad that the Biden administration did 2 actions expanding access to abortion drugs. Okay, so definitely he's filling up his sins. Okay. So I listed and read the judgments. Okay, so right after Biden and Lapid signed this paper, the security agreement, just the next 2 days there was rockets fired at Israel. 3 days later, on July 17th, Iran says it now can make a nuclear bomb. On July 21st, so like a week later, Biden had COVID. And then on July 23rd was when we were seeing the rise of the monkeypox in America. Fast judgment. Okay. On September 22nd, when Lapid mentioned the 2-state solution, we saw on October 7th, the IDF was on high alert due to stalled. Okay, so it actually was due to stalled. the stalled maritime agreement. Okay. I mean, so you're quote unquote making this deal with Lebanon and they're like ready to go to war with you is just crazy. So, I don't know if this connects to Lapid at the two-state solution or this is like judgment before the maritime agreement. Um, but we also saw on October 8th and the 11th some terror attacks in Israel. So then on October 27th, so you talk about fast, 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 fast judgment because Lapid signed the U.S. brokered maritime agreement. He is gone 6 days after the maritime agreement. Netanyahu's voted in, so very fast judgment on that. Okay, so that's why you could think maybe we're in the last days if you're seeing fast judgment happening. Okay, um, also just fast judgment for Biden connected to the maritime agreement. November 2nd, documents were found in his office. Okay, the documents surfaced. Okay, the hidden documents that he had on November 2nd. Okay. Uh, Netanyahu was voted in, I think, on November 1st. So, definitely very fascinating. Um, just how those 2 dates, yeah, elections in Israel, November 1st. Okay. So, let's see. So then on December 13th, um, yeah, so I was gonna try to make a connection with the documents and the sea land. I mean, basically what it is, it's a picture of, so Biden has, like, um, set up this abomination that causes desolation in Israel with it's you know it's something that God's not happy with that Biden did in Israel, um, because it's these leaders that are setting themselves up in the temple, which is, I see Israel and America as the temple. I don't need to wait for a temple to be built because I see the two countries as a temple. Okay, and so all you have to do is make kind of these quote unquote peace agreements and, you know, act like you're going to be a messiah bringing in peace, um, and trade away parts of the land or the sea. And, God considers that an abomination. Okay. And so it's interesting that, so because Biden did that to Israel, then God also allowed his disrespect for America to surface. Okay, starting on November 2nd. Okay, but then we saw really it came out, January 9th. And then, so what was interesting about the Respect for Marriage Act, quote unquote, was the same day masks are back for the triple demic, according to New York Times. Okay, and um, December 14th, the next day, we saw winter storms. December 20th was when the second batch of documents were found, this time at his home. Okay. January 3rd was when the Biden did 2 actions expanding access to abortion drugs. On January 7th was when the Republican Speaker of the House was finally voted in. January 9th was when the news outlets, okay, so like I said, publicly reported Biden, the Biden document situation. Okay. Let's see. Oh, so I wanted to comment on with Biden, doing these 2 actions, expanding access to abortion drugs. And I'm not even really sure if that's like legal. I mean, I thought Congress makes laws, but Biden, whatever, somehow took some authority to do these 2 actions. Um, So I think that's really interesting because we read in the story of so I won't read it out loud. You could read it. Um is that before Moses was born, who was the deliverer of the day, um back, in the time of Exodus, the time of the original Exodus, um Pharaoh was killing all the Jewish boys, okay? Um Every son who is born you are to cast into Nile, every daughter you are to keep alive. Okay, so it's interesting because it's interesting that we read in the story of Joseph about after 2 full years, Pharaoh is at the Nile, and then we're seeing, um, Pharaoh at the Nile killing the Jewish boys. So they're all connected, and then that connects to we're near the end of Biden's 2 full years, and he's bringing death to babies. Okay. And then in Matthew 2:16, it says, I'm going to read this because it's got a phrase which I think is really significant. It says, then when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. Okay, so it's interesting that it says Herod was tricked by the Magi because we see kind of like Biden was tricked by the Supreme Court, okay? And then Biden was, because they overturned Roe v. Wade, okay? And then Biden and all the people on the left were enraged. All the baby killers were enraged. And then Herod went and was killing the babies that were 2 year old and under. And, so I think that's significant because it connects to the 2 year time frame. And so it's kind of like this concept of, God's going to allow Biden to kill babies up to 2 years old. He's going to allow Biden to kill babies for 2 years. Okay. And then he's out of power. Okay. So, but what's all very interesting about both these stories is that, okay, so Herod was killing babies before Jesus the Messiah was born. Okay. So the fact that on January 3rd we saw Biden killing babies again, we can be looking for a Messiah. Okay. And so I'm wondering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Today's 16. Tomorrow would be 17 days. After January 3rd. So that's kind of interesting because 17 connects to Joseph too. Okay. So definitely very interesting. Okay, and then okay, so connected to Biden's abominations. Okay. It's okay, so this is from Esther. Okay, so definitely very interesting. Okay, because I want you to see how we're fulfilling scripture, and if you study scripture, you can see how it's being fulfilled. Okay, so it says Esther spoke to Hattak and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king to the inner court who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have, okay, so Esther is saying this. I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And then they related Esther's words to Mordecai. Mordecai told to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. These are really powerful verses, okay? And because first of all, okay, So when Esther says, all the king's servants and people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king to the inner court, who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death. Okay, unless, okay, so think of the king being God. Okay, so I think this is um, a spiritual law. Okay, and so any man or woman who comes to the king to the inner court. Okay, so any man or woman who comes to the inner court of Israel or the inner court of America in some way, um, um, that um, um, because the inner court would like connect to the Gentiles trampling the courts. Okay, um, that so God just has one law, that he's going to be put to death unless God holds out to him the golden scepter. The golden scepter would be a picture of the Messiah. Okay, unless you're forgiven by Messiah, okay, God's going to put you to death. Okay, for trampling the courts. Okay, of either America or Israel, the inner courts. Okay, and and we actually saw that happen on January 6th. Okay, so like on January 6th, um and what was interesting is that we saw judgment coming to the rioters on January 6th through the government in America. Okay, so they got arrested and had court cases and got sent to jail. And then what I thought was really interesting is that you could say, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. Well, it was interesting because we had a bunch of people that wanted to get pardoned by Trump. Okay. So that was kind of interesting. So what was really interesting is that Esther goes on to say, and I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. Okay, so what did I write? 30 days from the January 6th final report to January 20th. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay. But I also saw, I think, so I actually took 30 days too to be, okay, I mean, there's different ways you can get the 30 days. Okay. So, so if you take the January 6th final report, which was December 22nd, and add 30 days, that takes you to January 20th. Okay. But then if you take, okay, so the other thing that I looked at, which might be more true to what's being fulfilled, is that Esther says, I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days, is that I actually get 30 days from Hanukkah Eve, takes me to January 16th, okay? And then you throw in 3 more days, and that takes us to January 19th, which is, I'm looking at that really strongly. And that gets us 33 days, and we see that 33 time frame in other places in the scripture too. Oh, well, Esther goes to the king on the 3rd day, okay? So that could be a possible fulfillment. And the reason why that stands out to me is that, Esther said, I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And so we didn't see the Messiah on Hanukkah. Okay, we had to wait 30 days. Okay, well, actually, we have to wait 33 days. And we read in Leviticus 12 how the woman who gives birth is unclean for 33 days. Okay, so that could be what's being fulfilled. Okay, we'll have to see how things fill out in prophecy. Okay, we have to see prophecy get filled out. Okay, and then it says they related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's oops, sorry about that. Dropped the phone. You and your father's house will perish, and who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. Okay, um, so I think Esther could be a connection to Biden because Esther is in the king's palace. Okay. And so I wrote, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. Okay, so what if the Jews are a prophetic picture of the January 6ers? Okay. So just because Biden is president. Oh, and it's interesting too, because there's kind of a connection to Trump too, because Trump was like, I'm president, you can't convict me, kind of thing. But we also see Biden kind of doing the same thing, like I'm president, whatever, thinking that they're untouchable because they're presidents. Okay. And so what's interesting is that Mordecai said to Esther, if you remain silent at this time, you and your father's house will perish. Okay. What's going to happen? And so we saw that. We saw Biden trying to hide the truth about his document situation. He was remaining silent at this time. Okay. He's not repenting. He's not taking responsibility for his sins. He's trying to hide his sins. Okay. And then, so God says relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. Okay. So, one, that could be a picture of relief and deliverance will arise for Trump's followers from Trump, but also, too, ultimately, relief and deliverance will arise for God's people from the Messiah. Okay. And then Biden and his house will perish. Okay. So powerful. Definitely powerful. And that's not the only place too where I saw that concept about being silent. There's another place too. I can't think of it right now. Okay, and so then we're going to continue. I just wanted to continue these verses, even though they don't connect directly to Biden, I don't think. Well, they kind of do. Just because since we're looking at these verses, let's finish up the chapter. Or look at the next couple of verses. So then Esther told to reply to Mordecai, go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. Okay, so I've been thinking about this for a while, as I think the Jews fasting for 3 days, night or day, connects to Trump's followers fasting for Trump. Okay. And 3 days, night or day could connect to actually 6 days of Hanukkah. And because it was fascinating during Hanukkah is that they were releasing the final report of January 6th on the first day of Hanukkah. Or actually, let's see, get my December calendar out. So actually on the first day of Hanukkah was when they made the January 6th referrals to the Department of Justice, but they released their final report on December 22nd. So what we're seeing is kind of this, with the January 6th committee, we're seeing this increasing light during Hanukkah, is that they're continuing to increase the light on Trump and his followers' sins. Okay. And then, so even like on the 8th day of Hanukkah, December 26th, they were releasing more, like the interviews and stuff were being released all that week after the 26th. The January 6th committee, like they knew they were trying to wrap up their work because they knew that their time was coming to an end. And so they wanted to release all their all the stuff that they had researched. And then what's really interesting too was that on 12/22, see, I think it's interesting that it's 12/22/22, which was the fourth day of Hanukkah. Their final report was 845 pages. Okay. So what we see there is that number 8, Trump is the 8th king, but we also see his number 45 from when he was the 6th king. Okay. Fascinating. Let's see. And then thought there was something else too. They made 11 recommendations to Congress and others. So you have that 11 number, which connects to judgment. Oh, that's right. I wanted to talk about the 22/22 because, how I talked about like 2020 was the year of the two witnesses, because 2020 was when Trump did his, most of his, 5 of his 6 quote unquote peace deals. Okay. So that was the year of the two witnesses. Then we saw Biden rise in power in 2021. So that was kind of like, the rise of the 7th king. Okay. And then it seems like in 2022 that a lot of this year of 2022 was really exposing the sins of Trump. And because what's interesting is the number 22 connects to the 8th day of the Jewish holidays. Okay. So that's what I think was kind of the, if I had to summarize what was going on in 22, it was, besides the fullness of Biden's sin, it was also the revealing of Trump's sins. Okay. Because the January 6th committee, they actually said, that's the other thing too. They said they had 18 months of, investigation. Okay. So that 18 connects to the 666. Okay. And basically, at bottom line, they blame Trump for January 6th. Okay. Which I think could be accurate. And that's the thing too, is that I didn't talk about, I talk about kind of the main characters, but I didn't even talk about the smaller characters of, I think, Elizabeth Cheney is fulfilling prophecy. I think she connects to Elizabeth in Luke 1. I think Michael Cohen, he's also kind of revealing the sins of Trump. And so I think he could connect to maybe Michael in the book of Daniel. But then also Mary Trump, which is Trump's niece, could connect to Mary, who pours the perfume on Jesus. Okay, so there's that sweet fragrance. Okay, because so Mary Trump is another person who's trying to reveal the truth about Trump and his character. And God sees whenever you bring the truth to life, that's sweet smelling to God. Okay, so that's what Mary. Okay, so quick overview of those guys. That's okay. So that's a quick summary of all that stuff. And then, so it says, so I wrote night or day could connect to either increasing or decreasing light of Hanukkah. And so basically what's happening is during Hanukkah, you could have either been participating in increasing light if you were paying attention to what the January 6th people were saying, or you could have been a part of the decreasing light if you were ignoring what they were saying. Okay. And so remember too that the January 6th investigations, I believe, started on June 9th of 2022. Okay. And then also too in 2022 was 8/8. 2022 was when we found out about Trump's documents. Okay. So So kind of interesting that so 8-8, connects to Trump being the eighth king. Okay. Um so um okay. And then so I'm thinking the Jews fasting for 3 days, night or day, connect to the 6 days of Hanukkah when they were increasing the light of the truth about Trump, but also too Trump's peeps. Okay, so the fasting, the Jews fasting for 3 days, night or day, could also be okay. Two possible fulfillments: Trump's people fasting for Trump, or two, Messiah's people fasting because of Trump. Because they're sad of, oh my gosh, this guy was president. Look at a mess he made. Um, and is continuing to make. Okay, and then it says, okay, so then Esther and her maidens will fast in the same way. Okay, remember, Esther is in the king's palace. Okay, so that's a connection to Biden. So Biden, so then we had Trump's peeps were fasting for him. Okay, probably because of the January 6th stuff, and then definitely because of the document stuff. And then now we have Biden and his followers are fasting in the same way, because of um, the document situation in his case. Okay, and then so then after so what we're seeing is we're getting closer to Esther going into the king. Okay, um, which I talked about this before, where this is the lawless ones going into the king. Okay, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, the lawless ones. And if I perish, I perish. So these are the Trump followers willing to, um, you know, like sacrifice their life for their false belief of a holy war, a holy agenda. Okay, just like the Crusaders. Okay, they thought they were fighting a holy war, but they weren't. They ended up just causing a lot of mayhem and murder. Okay. Um, and then it says, so Mordecai went away and did just as Esther has commanded him. Which is Mordecai went away and assembled the Jews. Okay. Which is a picture of Trump assembling his army. Okay. So remember I said that Biden is the beast from the sea because the Biden administration brokered a maritime agreement with Lebanon that gives a triangle of Israel's sea property to Lebanon. He divided the sea property. Trump is the beast from the earth because he came up with this so-called deal of the century, which proposed to divide Israel's land along with parts of the capital, Jerusalem, to create a Palestinian state within Israel. And so he was dividing the land. He was measuring the land. Okay, talked about that in all my previous videos. Definitely is the beast from the earth. Okay, because we read in Psalm 105, God says he permitted no man to oppress them, and he reproved kings for their sakes. Do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm. Okay, so God gets mad if you mess with his people and his lands. Okay. Okay. So beast from the sea. Okay. So I'll just cover this really quickly. So this comes from Genesis, so since Biden is the beast from the sea, when we read about the flood growing, we're reading about the fullness of Biden's sins growing. Okay. And so it says Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the water came upon the earth. Okay, Biden became president after Trump's year of 6 quote unquote peace deals. Okay, so then it said it came about after the 7 days the water of the flood came upon the earth. So we saw on January 7th, 2021 was when Biden came to power. The water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. So God's people, didn't become a part of the sea. We floated, um, we stayed a little more heavenly. We didn't become seabound. Okay, the waters prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. So the seven churches were oppressed or suppressed both during the time of Biden. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher and the mountains were covered. Okay, so the 15th week after July 14th signing was when the maritime agreement was signed. Okay. Um, and then all flesh that moved on the earth perished, birds and cattle and beasts and every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth and all mankind. So the swarmers, or well, I guess the flesh that moved on the earth perished. Like, so Trump's people kind of perished during the time of Biden. Okay. Of all that was on the dry land, and all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life died. Okay, we saw that during the time of moving in Biden, is that we saw the Trump followers kind of dying, quote unquote, spiritually falling away. Okay. And it's in um um I mean, we see the number 22 there, so that's kind of interesting. Thus he blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the land. So I guess like during the year 2022 was also like even more and more followers of Trump were going to fall or whatever, and get the mark. From man to animals to creeping things to birds of the sky, they were blotted out from the earth, and only Noah was left, which would be together with those that were with him in the ark. That would be Messiah. So kind of the end of the falling away of Trump's followers and Biden's followers. And then it says the water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. So fascinating. 150th week after the deal of the century was when Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act. Okay. So 15 and 150 connect to the beast from the sea. Okay, quick overview. Trump's abominations. All connected. We see a lot of connection to 2017 was when he announced that Trump announced he was moving the embassy to Jerusalem. In 2020 was when we saw Trump's, the sixth one was in 2021, but we saw Trump's quote unquote 6 peace deals, which is interesting because Netanyahu keeps talking about 4 peace deals. And so I don't know why what happened, if one of them went away or he just doesn't recognize it. I know he's kind of blowing away the deal of the century. Maybe he kind of got wise and recognized it's not that great of a deal. But just kind of interesting. And then we saw Trump's peeps rioting in the Capitol on January 6th of 21. Okay, so when we read about 666 and that the beast from the earth decides who's going to buy or sell. Okay, we saw that Liz Cheney was a very strong picture of that, but we saw the power with Trump, that he decided who was going to participate in the marketplace. And so, because did I write that in there? It says Revelation 13:17, and he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. So only people that are, willing to like kiss Trump's feet, will Trump allow to buy or sell, which buying or selling is connecting. Trump is the businessman. Okay. So, allowing them to participate in his kingdom or whatever. Okay, so Liz got kicked out. We saw his document situation on 8/8. On 12/6/2022, we that number 6, we saw the Trump organization was convicted of 17 counts of tax fraud, which was the 5th year since 2017, when he made his announcement. So that was kind of interesting. And there's that 17 again that connects to Joseph. January 3rd to the 6th. Okay, so we saw a second kind of January 6th. So I think maybe ultimately there's going to be three kind of January 6th type events happening, because we saw a second kind of January 6th happening this year with McCarthy finally voted in as Speaker of the House on January 7th. So fascinating. So they had votes on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, half of the day on the 6th, and it wasn't until late night or early morning the 7th that McCartney was finally voted in. And so what we had is all these Trump followers, these far righters, basically putting a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, stopping the wheels of government from turning in America, because of their far right agenda, whatever their weird, strange belief system. And so it was interesting because, we saw that repeating of January 6th because, the Electoral College didn't get counted on January 6th. It got counted on January 7th, of 2021 when Biden, finally officially became president. Okay. So that was kind of interesting, the kind of a repeat of those dates. What was very fascinating is January 3rd was the 10th of Tevith on the Hebrew calendar, which is the day of the siege of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. So I think that, seeing the far right Republicans in government, they were kind of, putting up a siege against America or Washington, by their actions, on those days. Okay. So we're seeing so we're seeing Nebuchadnezzar, who, is probably a picture of Trump, starting his rise in power. Okay. So man of lawlessness, let's see. I already talked about how Esther's verses talk about, thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. And so then I put in the verse, so this is a picture of the Romans, pillaging the temple, okay, on the left hand side, and so it's a repeat in history. It's different. It's different items, okay, but it's still, Trump was still pillaging America, okay, with stealing these documents, okay. And then, so Mark 13:14 says, the day is coming when you will see the sacrilege object that causes desecration standing where he should not be. Reader, pay attention. Okay, we were also supposed to pay attention during Hanukkah too. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. Okay, so I think I talk about those scriptures, but those in Judea would connect to, the Jesus followers flee to Jesus. Okay, when you see these nutcases like Trump, and now it's being repeated with Biden, desecrating the temple, look to Messiah, okay, and pray to God, okay, look to the hills from where your help comes from, okay, we need God's help because, oh my gosh, we have these crazy people in power. So, and I mean, hopefully you understand that, Trump was breaking the law and Biden is breaking the law. I mean, despite the spin that everybody's doing, on either side of the aisle, they're breaking the law. They're putting America in jeopardy, both because military secrets could be getting out, secrets about where our spies are, or spies isn't a good word, but like the FBI, just whatever the things that America's trying to do to protect itself, those secrets could be getting out, and names and locations and all that stuff. So it's just going to cause destruction, to let that these secrets aren't being protected, okay, by both people, okay, by Biden and Trump, okay. So I mean, I believe Trump's the man of lawlessness, but I mean, but also Biden too, okay. I mean, there's twins in Rebecca's womb, I think. Um, and so we have the thief on the left and the thief on the right. Okay. Okay, so it says from Second Thessalonians, that's where we read about the man of lawlessness. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? Okay, so okay, so don't be quickly shaken just because you think you see Biden doing great things, or just because you thought you saw Trump doing great things in 2020, and just because you thought you saw Trump bringing peace to the Middle East. Don't be shaken by these lies, okay? They're false signs, okay? Um, and you know, and um, we're not going to see the Messiah until the apostasy comes first, okay? Um, and that happened. I believe that happened where we saw Trump's peeps, who I think are the terrorists, were falling away and going after Trump. They were leaving Jesus, um, and going after Trump. Okay. And so the man of lawlessness is the son of destruction. So God's going to cause destruction. I mean, not God. Trump's going to cause destruction in America. And so this guy takes a seat in the temple, displays himself as being God. Okay, so we're gonna see Trump acting like he's the savior of America. Okay, um, I mean, we saw bits and pieces of this, but we haven't seen the total fulfillment. When he returns, he's going to do this. Okay, um, so. And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. Okay, so sometimes we get little clues about who the verses are talking about. So I highlighted verse 6 and verse 8, because it says in verse 6, in his time he will be revealed, and then in verse 8 it says, then that lawless one will be revealed. So a connection to Trump, the sixth king and the eighth king. But then 7 gives us kind of a clue about Biden, the seventh king. It says, the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. So it gives us kind of a clue of who's restraining. Okay, so up to that point, so Biden was restraining Trump, or he's restraining Trump right now. Okay, but he's gonna do so until he's taken out of the way. Okay, and then it's very interesting. It says the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Okay, so I think Biden and possibly Obama have hidden lawlessness. I mean, basically lawlessness started with Obama's term as president, okay? Maybe even before that, some of the earlier, like Clinton too, maybe. They were starting to change laws and stuff like that, and take more power than the Constitution, afforded the presidents. And but it's interesting that the mystery of lawlessness. It's like that hidden, the hidden documents of, I mean, Biden, like how long ago did he take those documents? Okay. He said, or it's come out that they come from the time of Obama's presidency. So he had these documents for a while. Okay. Um, so it's not, so the fact that the two sides are like, we're the good ones and you're the bad ones, it's just ridiculous. They're both lawless. Okay. Um, okay, but also ultimately God is the restrainer. We read in Daniel 5:21 where Nebuchadnezzar was to recognize that the Most High God is ruler over the realm of mankind and that he sets over it whomever he wishes. So ultimately, God decides who's the leader. Okay, so when God didn't want Trump to be leader, he took him out of leadership, and that was the 70th week after um, um, the deal of the century. Both Trump and Netanyahu were no longer in power. Okay, and Trump was kicked off of um, Facebook and Twitter. Okay, um, but then God's gonna allow him to come back for a short amount of time. And so, here's what God says about Trump. The one who's coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders. That definitely connects to Trump. And with all the deception of wickedness, okay, his lies, for those who perish, his followers, Trump's followers, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. They weren't willing to listen to the January 6th commission, excuse me, to see the truth about Trump, okay? You know, they just believed Trump, that it was a witch hunt, okay? Instead of that, maybe there were some righteous people that God was using to bring the revealing of truths, okay, about Trump. And then, because then it goes on to say, for this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth but took pleasure in wickedness. So everyone who's believing the lies about Biden and believing the lies about Trump and, the lies about this document situation, that it's different on one side, it's not as bad on Biden's side, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but, Paul says, we should always give thanks to God for you, brethren, beloved by the Lord, because God has chosen you from the beginning for salvation through sanctification by the Spirit and faith in the truth. Okay. God's people walk in truth. Okay. So then, brethren, stand firm and hold to the traditions which you were taught. Okay. Whether by word or by letter from us. Okay. So, believing what was false. So with Trump's peeps, we have them believing, just a quick overview. They believed the election was stolen. They were believing that COVID and the vaccines were hoaxes. They were believing about deep space. A bunch of them were believing the QAnon lies. I mean, we could probably go on and on and on. The document thing that, maybe they're believing the lies that Trump had a right to them because he was president, and believing the lie that Trump declassified them by waving his magic wand or something stupid like that. But okay, so Biden's peeps, lies that they're believing that the blacks and the LGBT are the ones that are oppressed, believing the lies that climate change is a threat, believing the lies that abortion is healthcare, and then believing his lies about the documents, that it's his is better because he took responsibility even though he hid the truth for 2 months. So, lies, lies, and lies. Okay. So don't go either left or right. Okay, so you shall observe to do just as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right or the left, because thieves are on both sides of Jesus. Okay. And then in Luke 22, it says, there arose also a dispute among them, the disciples, as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. Okay. So we're seeing that, like Trump followers and Biden followers and the people on the left and the people on the right. Um, now we're having the dispute about the document debacle. Okay. And so I read somewhere that they were going to use words when they described Biden and his document situation. They were going to use words like cooperation, misplaced, voluntary, immediate. While for Trump, they were going to say obstruction instead of cooperation, and stolen instead of misplaced, and subpoena instead of voluntary, and then search warrant instead of immediate. And I mean, even some of these words for Biden are immediate. Oh yeah, because recognized truths. Biden was not immediate. He had these documents for over 6 years. It's a fallacy to say they were misplaced rather than taken without permission. Biden hid the truth about the discovered documents for 2 months. Okay. So I'm wondering if there's a 10-day of testing from January 9th to January 19th. How are you going to respond now that it's been revealed about Biden with the documents? Okay. That's what I'm wondering. So with Trump, there's so Hanukkah connections. The first, so like I said, during Hanukkah, the first day the January 6th committee made their referrals. The fourth day they did their final report. On the second day of Hanukkah, his taxes were wheeled through the Capitol. And then that's actually the second day of Hanukkah was when the second batch of Biden documents were found. The eighth day was when the interviews, etc., were released by the January 6th committee. So with Hanukkah too, is the story of Hanukkah connects to the abomination of desolation. And so what's interesting is that the rabbis kind of have this debate about whether you want to focus on the armed rebellion of Hanukkah, the Maccabees fighting to regain the temple, or do you want to focus on the spiritual rededication of the temple? And so I think that's kind of interesting, because I think we're going to see armed rebellion with Trump's followers, and Messiah's followers are going to wait for the Messiah to bring the spiritual rededication of the temple. We're not going to fight, okay? If we read Jesus's words, we know that God does not call us to be militants. I mean, unless Jesus is directing us. But, Jesus's disciples, they wanted to, they were ready to go to war when they were trying to arrest Jesus, and Jesus said, if I wanted to, I could have my father send down angels, to fight for me, and so he told them to put away their swords. The other, so other connections of Trump to Hanukkah is that on Hanukkah we spin a dreidel, which is, kind of like a top. And so there's a song that says, spin, 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 all fall to the ground. Okay, and so it's kind of this concept of the Jewish children are spinning tops instead of studying their scrolls. When the Greeks came, they hid their scrolls and spin tops instead. So I think that's a connection to Trump, because he's the great spinster, okay? His spin on truth, okay? And it causes all his followers to fall to the ground, okay? And they're more concerned about spinning things than studying the Word of God, okay? There's a connection to the eighth king, because the 8 nights of Hanukkah. On Hanukkah, you give money instead of like on Christmas, we give presents, okay? Kind of a connection to Trump. And then your menorah, you could either light it in the window or the doorway. The window is Trump, the doorway is Messiah. Okay. Um, so definitely interesting. Hanukkah Eve in 2020 was Trump's Morocco deal. Last year, the eighth day of Hanukkah was December 6th, which was 4 years after his declaration about moving the embassy. This year, the eighth day of Hanukkah was December 26th. Like I said, it's either 2 times 6 or 2 plus 6. Then there's Biden Christmas connections. On January 7th, 2021 was the Electoral College vote, which was on Orthodox Christmas. Trump has a Christmas connection. His inauguration was on January 19th, 6 years ago, because that's the Armenian Christmas, or the third Christmas. So that connects to Pharaoh's birthday, which is on the third day. Talked about this in a previous video, how they were assembling for war at Armageddon. So don't forget that Lindsey Graham said if Trump is prosecuted, there's going to be ariots in the street. And then in Daniel 5, we read about, so the writing on the wall, when it was interpreted, it says, many, many, God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. And so it's interesting that that's twice. And so I think that's a connection to the two document situation, like numbered your kingdom, like counting the documents, okay? But also counting your abominations, okay, and your sins. And then tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. That could connect to Trump's followers weighing Biden on the scales, because they're the buyers and sellers, and they're finding Biden deficient, especially because he's making a mess of the economy. And then it says, Paris, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. So we're going to see civil war in America. That same night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom about the age of 62. So you see that 62 or 20, 26 or 62, like January 6th. Or second time the sixth king is in power, okay? Is probably more what it is. Because like I said, I think there might be 3 January 6s. The gallows is 50 cubits high. Okay, let's see. The king arose in his anger from drinking wine into the palace garden. So first we had Biden criticizing Trump for the document scandal, and Haman was begging for his life. Trump was begging for his life. But then the king returned, and then Haman was falling on the couch. So now I think Biden is now Haman, and now he's involved in the document scandal. Because like falling on the couch where Esther was kind of connects to the raping of Dinah story. With anyways, then the king said, "Will he assault the queen with me in the house?" As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So Trump's peeps go after Biden, maybe because of the document scandal. I also think maybe too because they're trying to take away guns. That could cause Trump's followers to rise up. I mean, basically, I think Trump's going to say something and then civil war's going to start. But it could connect to the document scandal. It could be because they're trying to arrest Trump. Or it could be because they're trying to take away guns. So many things. Okay. And then one of the eunuchs, the terrors who were before the king, said, "Behold, indeed, the gallows standing in Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king." So 50 cubits high could relate to 5 years after the embassy announcement, but also the 50 and the 5 could connect to the dividing of time. Okay, the half a time, half a day. Um, so they hanged Haman on the gallows, which he had prepared for Mordecai. So Biden was working on dividing Israel, so God will divide America in civil war, but also Biden's administration was working on arresting Trump for his sins, and so Biden might end up getting judgment for his sins instead. And the king's anger subsided, so that's what God's going to use to bring judgment. Um, and then in Genesis 40, we said he restored the chief cupbearer to his office. I think that could be Trump, who's carrying the cup of judgment, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. So kind of like, and we've already seen a partial fulfillment of this where the judgment that's been on Trump um, has transferred to Biden's hand. Okay. But then the chief baker gets hung, just as Joseph interpreted. Okay. Netanyahu's return. Okay. So in Genesis 43, we see Joseph, for the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you. So we won't see Trump return to power until Netanyahu returns to power. Okay. Or we won't see the Messiah until Netanyahu returns to power. Okay. Daniel 12:1-2 says, now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. Excuse me. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. See, the resurrection of the wicked, they arise to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Okay, so Michael, the great prince who stands over the sons of your people. So the sons connects to the Jewish people. Okay, will arise. And so see, after Netanyahu arises, there's going to be a time of distress such as never occurred. And really, that's so true because there's been so much, distress, like distress of nations, because of Netanyahu returning to power. Biden gave him a call because he was worried about Netanyahu's agenda. The Saudi Arabia wouldn't meet with Netanyahu because of Ben Gvir being on the Temple Mount, which surprised Netanyahu because he thought, well, we're going to make peace with everybody with Saudi Arabia. And then they've been protesting Trump in the country. Not Trump, Netanyahu. They've been protesting in Israel. They've been protesting against Netanyahu and his government. It wasn't that like calm, the last time he was prime minister, and so, but that distress is back again. Okay. So what's interesting is December 1st, Netanyahu reached a coalition deal with the far-right religious Zionist party, bringing him closer to securing a new government. Okay, so that could connect to Daniel 12:1, but also Daniel 12 could just connect to December because Netanyahu was sworn in December 29th. Okay, so fascinating, isn't it? And then distress of Netanyahu because of his far-right government, his promises like annexing contested land, allowing Jews on the Temple Mount, discussion of building a third temple, which makes the Arabs all nervous, the Muslims all nervous. They sort of have an anti-Arab and LGBT people in Netanyahu's government. And then we saw Ben Gvir visited the Temple Mount on January 3rd, which was, also the 10th of Tevet. That was 3 events happened on that day, so definitely interesting. Netanyahu was in the Knesset on December 14th, the day after 12/13, when Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act and started the 150 week. Okay, so what's interesting about that is 150 weeks. Okay, so 70th week after the quote unquote deal of the century. Trump and Netanyahu were losing power. Um, and then the 80 weeks after that brings us to December 13th. Okay. Um, week 150. And so we read in Exodus 7:7 that Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. So we see kind of the return of Netanyahu the 80th week after the 70th week. And then we see like the start of the return of Trump on the 83rd week, because January 3rd was week 153. And so we saw the start of the return of Trump with Republicans having the majority in the House. And then, yeah, so 70th week was when Trump was kicked off of Twitter and Netanyahu was pushed out in Israel. Okay, so three things that happened on the 10th of Tevet. They started voting for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. Ben-Gvir walked on the Temple Mount, and the Biden administration expanded access to abortion drugs. Okay, so really like three groups of people, kind of causing a siege in, America or Israel. Let's see. So January 19th, 20th, and 21, I'm really looking at those dates. It says, thus it came about on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Okay, so January 20th. Okay, January 19th is the 6-year anniversary of the Trump inauguration. So that could connect to Pharaoh's birthday. And then he made a feast for all his servants that could connect to Christmas. And then the heads of the cupbearer and the baker get lifted up. And the cupbearer, and the lifting up of the head is already kind of happening because people are paying attention to Trump and Biden. And then he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. God uses Trump and his followers to bring the cup of judgment to Biden and his followers. That also could connect to, let's see, let me think. That could also connect to Netanyahu, because he could bring the cup of judgment with his presidency. Being prime minister, sorry, with his return. But then it says he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted. So Biden is hung on the gallows made for Mordecai. But actually, that could connect to Netanyahu, the chief baker, which would kind of make sense, because like the blood is the wine and the body is the bread, and so Netanyahu being Jewish would connect him to the baker with the bread. Netanyahu could be hung on the gallows made for Mordecai, which Mordecai could be the Jewish people. And then it says the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Trump and his followers don't remember Jesus the Messiah and try to establish their own messianic kingdom, but also they go to war against Jesus and his followers. I think is what's going to happen, is the next step, because then I think Jesus and his followers get rid of Trump and their followers and his followers. But then January 20th too is the 2-year. Oh, I already talked about this 2-year anniversary of Biden's inauguration. 40 weeks from Passover day 1 is January 20th. So that's why I think that's significant, because 40 weeks is the birth cycle. Okay. January 21st is the 40th day from 12/13. So 40 days from when Biden signed the Marriage Act. And then it's also the fourth year after the blood moon. Okay. But then, like I said, 21 connects to 777 when Lamech dies. Okay. Two witnesses. Okay, here's another fulfillment of prophecy. Two witnesses. When they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome him and kill him. So Trump and Netanyahu are the two witnesses. As the leaders of America and Israel, which are the ultimate two witnesses. Okay. And then it says their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt. So two nations there, Sodom and Egypt. I think Israel might be Sodom and Egypt might be Trump's kingdom or whatever. Where also their Lord was crucified. Those from the people and tribes and tongues and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate. And they will send gifts to one another because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. But after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God came into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who were watching them. So the 3.5 days, I'm thinking, is because it took 3.5 days to vote in Kevin McCarthy on January 7th. And it was really true. Like, if you had watched late night television, you would have saw, I think his name is Stephen Colbert, like, actually dancing, saying it was Christmas. They were just so happy that the Republicans were nutcases in the House. Okay. But then, the left rejoiced because the right couldn't get their act together in the House. But then after the 3.5 days, the breath of life, God allowed them to get their act together and vote Kevin McCarthy in. I said it like he was Paul McCartney. McCarthy in, and and they stood on their feet. Okay, so now we're at the feet of Daniel's statue. Okay, and then so great fear now because the Republicans are in charge of the House. And now we're seeing, especially with the document thing, that there's investigators investigating the investigators. Just it's a crazy time. Okay. 9/11, if you add it up, you see 23 in there, so that's kind of interesting. Does that connect to this year? Okay. So it definitely connects to the North Tower plus the South Tower of the Civil War. Okay. Okay, and then we read about the woman who 18 years had a sickness caused by a spirit, and she was bent double. So is being bent double connects to the two document problems, quote unquote, or the two whatever, that they're a mess on the right and a mess on the left. The Trump Tower, definitely saw that number 22 connected there, but also the fact that the blaze broke out on the 50th floor, I think that connects to that. The dividing of time, the number 5. Oh, because remember that Joseph predicted 7 years of famine, and so when they went to visit Joseph, he said there's been 2 years of famine and there's still 5 years to come. Okay, so we've been in 2 years of famine with Biden, and then we're going to move into the 5, which is the dividing of time. Okay, Back to the Future movie. Definitely see 9/11 hidden clues, see lots of clues. Okay. Now I'm wondering if the 9/11 upside down is actually showing us 119 is what I'm wondering. Okay. But also too, the Twin Pines kind of reminds us of Christmas, and the Twin Pines moves to the Lone Pine, and so one of the pines gets knocked down. Okay. Or the two different things. Okay, or the 2 pines get knocked down and then there's 1 pine left which is Jesus. So Trump and Netanyahu get knocked down, and then Jesus is left. Okay, the two towers got knocked down and then they rebuilt a new one. Okay. Um, but then um, so it's kind of interesting, like the twin pines. Oh, or we have three pines, which could connect to the third Christmas. Okay. I think 1, 3 through 5 connects to Hanukkah because the one could connect to Hanukkah Eve. Then you have 6 days of Hanukkah, so that's the 7 days of Hanukkah, and then the 8th day of Hanukkah is that 5. Okay, connects to the eighth king, or connects to the dividing of time. So we see kind of that hidden 1, 3, 3, 5 there. So, because Marty returns to the mall right when Doc is being shot by the Libyans, which I thought was interesting that Doc is called Doc because that connects the deal of the century too. Definitely think there's hidden prophecy in this movie. Marty is the 5. There's 5 letters in Marty, 5 letters in McFly. That could connect to the 5 foolish virgins and the 5 wise virgins. Doc Brown actually adds up to 8, so that's kind of interesting. So maybe so Doc could be a picture of, like, they're about to shoot Doc when Marty shows up. Okay, so they're about to arrest Trump when his followers show up and fight to save him or something. I don't know. Okay, so then I wrote 1 could connect to Hanukkah Eve, then it's 33 days until January 19th, which is the Armenian Christmas. And then what's interesting is January 17th is the second 24 from Haggai 2:20, because it is Tevet 24. So 3 more days, 17th, 18th, 19th, leads us to the 19th, which is Pharaoh's birthday on the 3rd day. Anniversary of Trump's inauguration. Okay, so this is also from Back to the Future. So fire on the left and fire on the right. So that actually could be happening right now if you see like judgment as a type of fire. God is allowing judgment on Trump and Netanyahu. Trump and Biden. Okay. But so what's interesting though is the license plate says California. Okay, and then out of time. So I'm wondering if one of the signs is we're seeing all these weather events in California, and so God's saying you're close to being out of time. Okay. But also this is another picture of Jesus, where Jesus is the one who's out of time, not connected to time, and then is the thief on the right and the thief on the left are burning, or it's the burning bush. Okay. I don't think I'll go over this. Samson, definitely a connection to Trump. Well, okay. The Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. Democrats celebrating because of Trump's legal woes. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. J6 committee concluded that Trump caused the destruction on January 6th. It so happened when they were in high spirits that they said, call for Samson that he may amuse us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them, and they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, okay, the boy could be Biden, the restrainer. Oh yeah, the restrainer. Okay. Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof, looking on while Samson was amusing them. Okay, so Biden's peeps were on the roof. Okay, they're they're the ones with leadership and power. Okay, but God tells the people on the roof, don't go down and get your coat, your cloak. Okay, don't try to keep your leadership position. Um, then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time that I may at once be avenged of the Philistine for my 2 eyes. So 2 eyes connects the two witnesses. And then we see number 29, which adds up to 11, which is judgment. Samson grabs the two middle pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. So you could see the Philistines as being like Biden's followers. But then I also think that there's a connection with Netanyahu and the Palestinians, okay? That they go to war to the death in Israel, okay? And he bent with all his might so that the house fell on the lords and the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those he killed in his life. Could definitely connect to Netanyahu, will definitely connect to Trump. Then his brothers and all his father's household came down, took him, brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years. I don't know what the 20 connects to. I don't know if that connects to Netanyahu's time frame. Or or it connects to like the second time of Trump, And okay, other stuff, just I have so much stuff, and so I'm just gonna do this really quick. Joseph's cup is put in Benjamin's sack, the signet ring from Pharaoh's hand to Joseph's hand. So we're seeing the cup of judgment goes from Trump to Biden, okay? Or the ring goes from Pharaoh's hand to Joseph's hand, okay? Okay, in Genesis 45, it says no man was with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So that 45 connects to Trump. So maybe like no man is, that could be the restrainer. Trump no longer has a restrainer when he made himself known to his brothers. I already said this, 2 years of famine, but 5 more years, 2 years of Biden, then the dividing of time. Genesis 41. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God and God will quickly bring it about. Repeating of the dream twice could relate to the two document issues. The fact that there's 2 thieves, so God's going to quickly bring about judgment. Okay. Mark 14. And Jesus said to him, truly I say to you that this very night before a rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times. Rooster crowing twice could relate to the 2 document issues, while denying me 3 times could relate to the 3 types of January 6th. Twins in a room, 2 thieves with Jesus connects the 2 politicians with document issues, the 2 thieves, okay? The twins get separated from her body, big division, okay? Genesis 42, now came about, the city gets divided into 3. Genesis 42, now came about as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their fathers saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. Okay. Could be a picture of Biden's and Trump's document problems. Okay, that they were emptying their sacks, like I guess they were cleaning out Biden's office, and then behold, the money was in their sack, and then they were dismayed about that. Okay. Trump has 3.8 million followers on Truth Social. FYI, if you think there's not enough people to follow him to create problems to make an army. Even if just a percentage of those people go to war with him, we're in trouble, 53% of the Trump voters in the 2020 election said that civil war was likely in the next decade. Okay, so remember the Crusades, I already said this, I think 3 times, where many people falsely believed they were fighting a holy war. Okay, Problems voting in Kevin McCartney were similar to events that happened right before the Civil War when the country was in a deep divide. Okay. So we're repeating history. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. You always repeat history. Okay. So the country is just like it was before the Civil War. Okay. That's why we can expect, you study history to know what's going to happen. Okay. We can expect the Civil War to come. 10 days of testing. I already said that. Matthew 24. Oh, so this is interesting too, because Matthew 24 has 20 to 21. But pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. So 24 could relate to the 2 years of Biden. Then January 20th is 2 years after his inauguration, and January 21st is the Sabbath. So we'll have to see how it works out. No one knows the day or the hour. I mean, I have 3 potential days: the 19th, 20th, and the 21st. I mean, mostly I'm looking like the night of the 19th through the 20th, but there's also the Sabbath thing. I mean, we'll just see what happens. I mean, things might happen, and then Genesis 42:36 says, their father Jacob said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and you would take Benjamin. All these things are against me. Okay, so we're in that time frame, because you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, the Messiah is no more. Simeon is Biden, could connect to Biden, because then Simeon is then put in jail, is no more. And you would take Benjamin, and because now they want to take Trump and arrest him. All these things are against me. So basically we have Jacob is like a picture of America weeping that we have these 3 leaders that no longer seem to exist, or whatever, or about to all get arrested, or whatever. And so that connects to Rachel weeping for her children. Genesis 43, Israel said, why did you treat me so badly, so as to tell the man that you had another brother? That could connect to the Messiah saying, why did you treat me so badly, and act like Trump was your brother rather than, waiting for the Messiah. Genesis 44, behold, the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks we have brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Okay, so that could be a picture of Biden saying, I returned the documents. Why are you giving me such a hard time? Okay, like, why are we accusing him now of stealing silver or gold? Okay, and then searching Joseph's brother's sack for the cup connects to searching Jacob's and his wife's tent for the idols, which connects to searching for the documents. Rachel tried to hide Laban's idols in the camel saddle. Okay, Biden tried to hide the facts about the documents. Okay. So interesting, because a camel could have 2 humps, so 2 document issues. Okay, the volcano in Hawaii started erupting May 3rd, 2018, which was 11 days before Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem on May 14th, 2018. The most active fissure was Fissure 8. Okay, definitely interesting, like connects to the 8th king. Okay, Numbers 20:29. Israel wept for Aaron for 30 days. Okay, could connect to the Jews mourning for 30 days from Hanukkah, because the Messiah did not come on Hanukkah. Also, 30 days connects to not worshiping the golden idol that Nebuchadnezzar sets up. God is testing us to make sure we aren't justifying Trump or Biden during the 30 days from Hanukkah until January, like I said, January 16th, or during the 30 days from winter until January 19th. Okay. Esther was not summoned for 30 days to come to the inner court. Okay. Fiery furnace gets 7 times hotter. Could connect to the fact that now Biden, who's the 7th king, has a document problem. Could also connect to Netanyahu's new government stirring things up. So, but we see that 7 number, which connects to the 7th king. December 21st was the first day of winter and the appearance of winter storm Elliot. Elliot is the Hebrew name for Elijah. Okay, John the Baptist also connects to Elijah. So remember, before the Messiah comes, we're going to see Elijah. Okay, Elliot is the name of the boy in E.T. E.T. phone home. Okay, so could mean Elliot could be a sign that we're getting close to going home. Okay, um, or supposed to be praying to God or whatever. Okay, John 1 says, okay, so this is from the book of John. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light so that all may believe through him. He was not the light, okay, but he came to testify about the light. There was the true light which cometh into the world enlightens every man. Okay, so the light shines in the darkness connects to Hanukkah, okay, but the darkness didn't understand it. They rejected the truth about Biden and rejected the truth about Trump. But verse 5 also connects to Obama, the 5th king, which was when the light of Messiah was snuffed out in America. Okay, there came a man sent from God whose name was John. Okay, verse number 6 connects to Trump. Okay, he came as a witness. Okay, remember Trump's middle name is John, by the way. He came, and not Jonathan, just John. Okay, he came as a witness to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. Okay, 3 witnesses on December 21st, during first day of winter. Okay, Winter Storm Elliot, which was day before January 6th committee's final report reporting to Trump. Netanyahu with the new government in Israel. And then Zelensky speaking before Congress on December 21st. Okay. So definitely witnessing type stuff. So that this winter storm is testifying about the light, like helping us to look for Jesus. Okay. Okay, but then it says, he was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. So it's number 8. Also connects to Trump, who talks about himself with messianic terms, but he is not the light. Okay. Netanyahu's not the light. Zelensky's not the light. Although I think Zelensky does some good things. I'm not really sure. And then number 9, there was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. Praise the Lord, this is Jesus, which might connect to him being like the 9th king, okay? See a Biden, see a Trump, stay on the dry land with Messiah, no lies, okay? Revelation 16:19, the great, and there's that 19 number again. The great city was split into 3 parts. So maybe we're going to see a division type thing happen tomorrow. And the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God. Remember it says, I should finish the verse. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Remember it says when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, just look up. Okay, so Jesus is coming really soon. Okay, so hopefully it's really true that we're in the final birth pangs of Messiah. If not, I'll have to try to make another video by the grace of God. I mean, it was hard enough to get this one made. About potential other dates. Yeah, we'll have to look at that later if things don't happen this weekend. So, but anyways, hang in there. We got to be near the end. We're seeing so much stuff being fulfilled. We've seen the return of Netanyahu. So definitely, prophecy is being fulfilled. Events are being, have been put in motion, for preparing for the return of Messiah. So look up Um, don't go into the field, which is don't follow Trump. Don't, if you're in the city, get out of the city. Don't follow Biden anymore. If you're from Judea, look up, look to Messiah. Um, so there we go. So hopefully that was helpful. I really appreciate you listening to my videos. I pray for God's grace for you, that you can hang in there and to wait and attain, for the 1335 days, which is probably like waiting for the dividing of time. Because then what happens is, God, Jesus comes and collects his people and separates us out while God's enemies fight out in civil war. So just hang in there, and then it's gonna be like we're dreaming. So, um, so hang in there. God bless. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. Take care.